Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Obias. Happy day for Louisville. They finally got the IARP. Report finally came through. This almost decade-long saga has now come to a close. Can Louisville finally rest, Lauren?
I mean, I guess so. This is like typical NCAA, right? Like, at a certain point, and I think we saw this at least some with like North Carolina, at a certain
Mm-hmm.
point, it genuinely kind of does become like, okay, they've probably been, the time alone is probably like punishment enough at a certain point.
Thank you. Thank you. Because it's funny. It's like, oh man, like people see the IARP ruling, and honestly, I forgot. I'll be straight up. I forgot the particulars
I
of
did too.
all the
I
things
forgot that
that
this
that
was a
happened.
thing that was, yeah, I forgot this was
Yeah.
a thing that was happening.
In the same way that NC State's IARP ruling came through related to Dennis Smith and the Adidas scandal, everything else. But to your point about what can the NCAA really do to Louisville that Louisville already hasn't done to itself, right?
Right.
Right down
Yeah.
to firing Rick Pitino, which all of this was a lead up to commemorate now that this is all over. Let's go back 7 years, Lauren, before we talk about this weekend's matchups with State and Wake and Carolina, Virginia, and say hello to our friend Rick Potato, which Rick Potato was brought to ACC Basketball Media Day. Yes, well, hold on, let me scroll down to the date. Yes, that date is October 28th, 2015. Our friend Martin Rickman, because Rick Pitino did not show up to ACC Media Day to answer questions about his own scandal. Rick Potato answered the hard questions, Lauren.
Yes, he did. That was awesome. I loved that. And I need to tweet out Martin's piece on that because it's actually really worth reading. Because I had forgotten somehow in all of this,
Mm-hmm.
probably because I was pregnant at the time and didn't know it, but I'd forgotten somehow in all of this that he sent, instead of coming himself, he sent those two grad school transfers that had never before played for Louisville. And I had forgotten how horrible everything was with them, and
Mm-hmm.
the fact that they didn't find out till too late that they weren't going to get to play in the NCAA tournament anyway. And it just stinks. There are so many like players that become victimized by these types of things that maybe don't even have any role in them. It's
Yeah.
so annoying. And I mean, I even saw people from Louisville tweeting about Brian Bowen, who became the face of this and his career
Yeah.
was ruined. I mean, how many
Yeah.
players from North Carolina football for relatively minor infractions did we see their careers go up in smoke
Mm-hmm.
over this? Like, it's really unfortunate.
Speaking of the Tar Heels and football, there is a sequence of events that can happen for North Carolina to clinch the Coastal Division. Um, I don't know if all these sequences are going to play out, but North Carolina essentially controls their destiny, so to speak, in
Oh,
the Coastal
that's
Division.
never ominous for any of
But
our locals.
that's I think the part where Carolina fans who've been around the block a few times are a little worried about going to Virginia, which has traditionally been a very difficult place for North Carolina to play. Although I really don't think this iteration of Cavaliers football is going to give it to them. I mean, Brennan Armstrong is not the Brennan Armstrong of last year. Virginia's offensive line has a lot to do with that. The Tony Elliott experience has not gotten off to a great start after Bronco Mendenhall decided to call it a career at Virginia. I know that Carolina is capable of winning every game and losing every game.
Right.
I don't think they're going to have any problems against the Cavaliers on Saturday.
I don't know if I'd be so quick to say like wouldn't have any problems. I will give Virginia this. Their defense has gotten a lot better. It's
Fair.
improved. We saw we saw how that Miami Virginia game played out. All field goals in regulation and with no turnovers, which I didn't know until I saw the Bill Connolly box score. He's like, you
Mm-hmm.
just don't see that very often, that there are no touchdowns and no turnovers. Like it's just all field goals or nothing and punts. Like, but yeah, like I mean, there's just no telling, I mean, I agree that they may not have any problems with them. I think that they should probably win. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say that there aren't going to be moments, early
Mm-hmm.
on or maybe even later that people are saying, oh God, oh God, oh God. But yeah, I mean, on balance, you would think that it's not going to be an issue. I think I already did tweet earlier this season that if they can't beat this Virginia team, they don't deserve to go to a bowl. So someone will probably old takes expose me on that one. So maybe that's why I'm sweating it a little bit.
Maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the case. North Carolina showed up at number 17 in the college football playoff rankings on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I preface everything we discussed with the college football playoff. The initial rankings don't really mean anything. It's all going to change after the results this weekend, including that Tennessee Georgia game that has Tennessee number one, Georgia number three. Same with Michigan fans who are upset about their ranking behind Clemson. Well, you know what? You got some things in your control that you can take care of that'll move you into the top four if you take care of that business. But I did find North Carolina at 17 more proof positive to me, at least, of how the College Football Playoff Committee uses these weekly check-ins to build the framework out for the rest of the season in terms of how we
Okay.
talk
Yeah.
about stuff.
Yep.
I don't know what Carolina has really done to be the 17th best team in the country according to the College Football Playoff. They've had some scares. They don't really have any wins of note.
Yeah.
But they've won the games. They only have one loss, and that one loss is to a
You know what
Notre
they
Dame.
have done? Pass the eye test because they have a great offense. And we
That's
saw
really
how
what it
important
is.
that was to the committee.
Yep. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's North Carolina does pass in that regard. They've got Drake May. They have dynamic wide receivers, and Mac Brown's a likable coach that the industry likes. So they got all those things going for them. But I also think the way that the rankings played out from 15 to 25 helped build that framework for Clemson as well. A lot of people were surprised that
Yeah.
Clemson was number four, and I wasn't surprised because
I
if you look
wasn't
at
either.
they've got three teams that they've beat in the back end at 20, 21, and 22. Wake Forest, or Syracuse, Wake Forest, NC State. Now, these will still change over time. NC State and Wake Forest are playing on Saturday night, which we'll get to here in a second. But North Carolina continues to win. They're only going to move up in the rankings. And, of course, who are they going to play in the ACC championship game? So Clemson still has stuff built up in the framework that if they take care of business and look good, they'll remain in that conversation for the college football playoff. And who's to say that Notre Dame, who they have to play, obviously, doesn't close out the season strong, and suddenly that looks like a better win against a team that got things going.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. Although,
Mm-hmm.
you never know. Their closing strong could have started last week. We don't really know that yet.
It's a
And
good point. It's a good
maybe
point.
it bleeds into this one. We all know if Notre Dame is good at one thing, it's usually not doing what's in the ACC's best interest.
This is true.
Usually, I'll give them
This
the
is true.
exception of making it to the title game in the pandemic year because that obviously ultimately was good for the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, it's not as if they have the league's best interests in mind in general. And obviously they want to win games too, right? Like Marcus Freeman, first-year head coach, he's been under a bit of a microscope for some questionable losses they've taken.
Mm-hmm.
They got things going against Syracuse. They really dominated that game. And so who knows? They have the talent to be better than we've seen them play, I think. I think we'd all agree on that. But
yeah.
And I think I don't think that first game was completely meaningless either against Ohio State necessarily. I mean, we saw their defense control North Carolina's offense that nobody has been able to either.
Yeah.
And we saw them, kind of keep Ohio State's in check I know that they were without some weapons. I know it's game one, but the defense is legit enough that I at least think it might be a tougher game than maybe we think it's going to be with Clemson.
Now, I'll tell you the game, and we'll close on this. The game that I really don't know what to expect is Saturday night's matchup between the Deacons and the Wolfpack.
Yeah.
Gilio and I talked to Dave Clawson, head coach of Wake Forest, this week, and I was serious in the question, take me into the coach's brain. My attitude after what happened against Louisville is that you just burn the tape, right? Just burn the tape.
Well, maybe
but Clawson,
keep the tape of all but the third quarter, and then that just
it
went missing.
But that's actually what he broke down, and he's like, "Look, you go through, you see what you did wrong, and then you basically use these things to reiterate to your team. This is why execution matters." And he very much used this week to bristle at the idea that Sam Hartman had a Sam Hartman blow-up game, right? He wanted to kind of dismiss that, and he said, "Look, he was responsible for definitely one turnover, maybe two. The rest of them were things that were out of his control, perfectly thrown balls while the wide receiver drifts a little bit to the left or the right." So he did a lot to defend Sam Hartman's play. I understand why he's doing that, because they have to get up off the mat after a disappointing performance, and they have to take on a team in NC State that they've had some really wild games, and they've been close games, with the exception of 2019. And the X factor in all of this really is, how is NC State going to approach this game with MJ Morris at quarterback? How are they going to be aggressive, or are they going to try to drag Wake Forest down to how they want to play, which has not really worked out for them? It didn't work out against Syracuse. It did not work out against Virginia Tech early on. And it wasn't until the Wolfpack found themselves down a couple scores, Lauren, that they finally opened things up. I'll be curious to see if any lessons will be applied on Saturday night against Wake Forest.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see too, because we saw that he has natural talent, but we also know again what their game plan has been. Even when they had a quarterback that they trusted a heck of a lot
Yeah.
more, and it'll be interesting to see if that is their game plan. Because I don't know why this made me think of this, but I saw the Narduzzi quote today about talking about how they could have run the ball last year. They didn't, and he would have liked to have run it more, something like along those lines. And he loves running the football. Like, that's just who he is. That
As we
is the
saw on
offense
Saturday night.
That's the offensive mindset he's stuck in. I'm not saying NC State likes to do that. I don't think we've necessarily seen them stick to the run to the detriment of everything else. That's not even what I mean. I just mean that when a coach has something that they're very wedded to philosophically, it is not always easy to just get them to kind of change. Like, we've seen Dave Doran, I think, get this team to change its mindset over the years and kind of get up off the mat a time or two, for sure, when they could have easily stayed down and lost confidence and everything else. But I mean, I don't know. Like, does that mean that he's like going to just suddenly open it up from the opening kickoff, especially when you risk, right? If you make a mistake, if the freshman throws a pick, you're going to risk a team with a far more potent offense than you've seen in the last couple of weeks being able to kind of make you pay for that. And that's a factor too, I think, is the fact that, like, Wake will make you pay for mistakes. And I know Dave Doran's going to know that. I know Tim Beck's going to know that. And so it'll be interesting because it's the balancing act, right? It's like, do you take risks to try to score points, or because you have to score points, right?
Yeah, with Wake Forest, you're going to have to score points.
That's the thing. I agree. But how do they kind of balance that? How do they approach it? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. And then, does Wake get off the mat again? I don't know the answer to that either. They did a really good job of it earlier this year, but, like, that was a game I doubt anybody was expecting to have 8 turnovers in a quarter. Like, I've never even heard of that happening. And obviously Dave Clawson's gotten them up off the mat before, but it'll be interesting to see if he can do it again, because it's going to be a tall order for them too. And I get what he's saying about Sam Hartman. I'll just say this. I know some Wake people that I follow were kind of tweeting about Sam's body language after some of those turnovers and everything else. I mean, he's a human. He's going to react.
He's going to be mad. He's going to be mad at himself. Makes total sense.
But I understand, like, sometimes that can spiral. And so you have to try to get right. Sam's been open about his mental health and things like that too. And it's not, it's not easy. And I get it. But, does it carry over against a state defense that can, be very difficult to play against? I don't know. Or if he gets going early, does he keep that up, or does he have another nightmarish quarter? I don't know the answer to that either. So there are a lot of, like, unknowns up in the air, even as, like, both fan bases seem to feel pretty sure of exactly what's going to happen, and both think it'll be bad, I think. Well, maybe Wake fans don't think that as much, but I know State fans do.
State fans are always thinking that. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We'll actually see you this weekend to talk about these matchups and more. Enjoy.